Hey everybody, welcome back. I wanted to be sure and go over a few of the techniques that you will need to know to create your poster for this class using Adobe Photoshop. And so I want to go over some of these basic techniques, starting with the overall size of your poster. We're going to go to Create New, which will obviously create a new file for us. And when you do that, Adobe Photoshop will bring up a wide variety of options for you, including a lot of default sizes and template sizes, like 4:6 landscape photos, dimensions for video production, sizes that are friendly for your mobile phone or illustrations, as well as common printed sizes like 8.5 by 11, 8.5 by 14, and what is called tabloid size, which is 11 by 17. Now, for the sake of this video, let's assume your project, however, isn't one of these sizes. We will have to go in and customize it. So let's say that we have an advertisement that's 11 inches by 14 inches. You notice you can plug in any size that you want here. It's just important that you use whatever measurement you're comfortable with. So maybe you're more familiar with centimeters than inches. If you are an experienced designer or used to working with pixels, you can also be that precise in the height and width of your design. But we're going to stick with inches. One other thing that's very important for your design is to choose a resolution that's suitable for it. Long story short, if it's only going to be in a digital format only, a resolution of 72 is probably okay. If you're sure it's never going to be going through a printer, it's never going to be printed. However, this is a default setting to a resolution of 300 pixels per inch. That's a pretty good guesstimate for a high resolution printed image. So it's going to ask you your color mode and your background contents. Now we can change this later. But RGB is going to be there for red, green, and blue color mode. That's best for digital. If it's going to be going through a printer, you can choose the CMYK color mode, which is for cyan, magenta, yellow, and the K stands for, any guesses? Yeah, there's not that many colors that start with K. It's actually key or the black color. So we have cyan, magenta, yellow, and black. And that's going to be best if it's going through a printer. So let's go ahead and set our color mode to CMYK. Again, you're going to be looking at your individual project requirements, but this is a good starting point for us. Resolution of 300 if it's going to be printed, and CMYK color mode. A white background contents is fine, but you can make that really any color that you want, even transparent if for some reason you wanted to. And then you can hit create. And you'll notice what that will do is we'll bring up a canvas for you to work with that's completely and entirely blank. Just like we've talked about in other videos, what's very good is to unlock your background layer. So we can do that by double clicking the little lock icon, and that will kind of free things up and remove our lock from our background. It also changes our background to layer 0. Now, if you want to follow along with me in this class, that means you have access to the businessman folder guy image, also the notebook paper image. So you can download those if you're in this class and do want to follow along. Those are the two primary images I'll be working with as we create kind of a flyer / mini poster here. And we'll be using a handful of tools along the way as we go. One thing that we can do is we can insert an image into this file. One way to do that is to go to File and choose Open. And we're going to open our businessman2.jpg and hit open. But that's going to open it on a different tab. Oh no, it's actually no problem. Because we don't need this entire image, we just need this fellow kind of cut out of the background to use for our poster. And so how might you cut a model, an object, a shape, in this case, this nice businessman holding not one but two folders out of the background? There are a lot of ways you can do that. If you have a steady hand and a bunch of free time, you can use what's called the lasso tool. And I wouldn't recommend this, by the way. And you can actually try to cut him out by hand. I'm going to go really fast and do a horrible job just for the sake of time. But you notice that's not very precise. So our marching ants are showing us what we've selected to keep. See how those little dots kind of look like marching ants? We don't want to keep that. We want to get rid of our selection. So we can go up to select and choose deselect, or if you're using a Mac, you can hit Command D. What is one of the more common ways to get rid of someone from the background is to use what's called the magic wand tool. And what the magic wand tool will do is it will select things that are of a similar hue or color. And it can select only those colors that are touching or not. So I can hit contiguous, then I can select the white background, and it will select everything that's touching where I clicked that is a similar shade of white. I can deselect that, just to give you an idea what the tool does, and click on this blue folder, and it will try to select only that precise shade of blue in this folder. Now, if you need it to be a little bit more accepting of some different shades of blue, some different variations of that hue, you can actually increase the tolerance. If you think about tolerance just as a word, if our tolerance is a high tolerance, then we're going to accept a lot of things. If we have a very low tolerance, we're not very accepting of a lot of things. The same thing works with the magic wand tool. If you have a higher tolerance, notice I changed my tolerance from around 30 to 120, and I click on this blue folder. Suddenly we're getting this kind of more dark blue that's closer to his thumb, and therefore having a little bit of the shadow from the lighting source. And it's going to select all of it. And so you might want to play around with tolerance as you remove someone from the background. So if we click the white background, and then we tell ourselves we want to, select everything but our white background, we can go to select and choose inverse, and notice that we'll select our model, but our tolerance is too high. We're doing something weird with his lapel of his shirt here. So we can again deselect that selection, make our tolerance lower again, select the background and choose select inverse. And now we've selected our model. Obviously we have a little bit of a gap here at the bottom area near his legs, but for now, for the sake of this tutorial, we'll just move on. So we can, just like you copy and paste from maybe a Word document to a different Word document, you can actually copy and paste in Photoshop as well. You can go to Edit and choose Copy, and this will copy what you've selected. So you've selected this guy. We can go back over to our blank canvas that you've probably almost forgotten about by now, and hit Paste. And we'll notice here this will paste him as a new layer. Now right now he is tiny. He is teeny tiny here. Probably too small to be suitable for this poster. Well, we could go to our Move tool here in our toolbox. Our toolbar, I should say. I can move him around. He can go wherever I want to put him. You'll notice that there are kind of crosshairs that appear, or guides, if you will, in Photoshop if the default settings are on. And so if you want to kind of center him vertically, center him horizontally, it does give you the chance to do that. But I think symmetry can be rather dull. So let's position him here at the bottom of the poster. But let's say we want to make him bigger. Well, while there's not a precise tool button to click on, if you go to Edit and choose Transform, so we've got Edit and then Transforms about halfway down, and choose Scale, this will give us the option to scale this nice fellow. And we can do some really weird things if we want. However, if this little link is checked between the width and the height, that prevents us from doing those strange things. You know, we've all seen a photoshopped image for one reason or another, where the person is maybe too thin or abnormally photoshopped wide, or maybe they are, you know, wider than they are tall, I should say. And as a general rule, no one wants to be wider than they are tall. And so if we hit this link button again, this will constrain our proportions, that's what I'm getting to, so that he is his original photographed length and width, just a bigger percentage. So right now, for example, this is at 231.17% of the original width, and that same 233.17% of height. And that's a beautiful thing. And so we can move him. Let's put him here kind of toward the bottom left for the sake of argument. And as you're doing this, because Photoshop is simply guessing and working with pixels, your image might look pixelated. Don't worry about that until you hit Enter or Commit Transform. And then if he looks pixelated after you've hit OK, you may need to find a different image, a higher resolution image. But this looks pretty nice. So we just took that same image and we blew him up and constrained our proportions. And this looks kind of dull. We can certainly add a background if we want to. We can go to, for example, our Paint Bucket tool, which is almost exactly halfway down in our toolbar. And the paint bucket is going to fill a layer with the same color of paint. We want to make sure that our paint bucket tool is selected. And you might be wondering, well, what color is it going to kind of spill paint all over? Well, if you go here toward the bottom of your toolbar, you've got Set Foreground Color, Set Foreground Color, and Set Background Color. If we click inside where it says Set Foreground Color, we can choose any color background that we want. I'm going to choose kind of this orange color and hit OK. And it's very important when you're working with the Paint Bucket tool that you're on the correct layer in your Layers menu. Again, if you don't see your Layers menu, you can always hide or make visible any of these layers, any of these windows that you want, including the Layers menu. And so you're going to go to Layer 0, which is our plain white background layer, and we can then spill paint using that Paint Bucket tool on the background, and it automatically looks better. However, let's say that we want to insert an additional image into this design. And again, a bunch of ways to do that. This is kind of strange, but this is my preference, is to go to File and choose Open. And I'm going to choose this notebook paper image that's available in the class folders. It's paper1.jpg. I'm going to unlock that background layer. And I'm simply going to go to the Layers menu, click on it, and drag it. See how it's almost transparent? And drag it all the way up until our Untitled 1 document is here. And then I'm going to just let go and place it there. Now again, this layer needs transformed because that looks really strange. So we can go to Edit, Transform Scale. And if you're a math person, I forgot to mention this earlier, you can actually type in a certain number that you like. Or if you're not a math person, which I think is a lot of us, we can grab any of these kind of 8 points and drag and adjust your image just like that. So if you like your transformation, you can hit Enter or hit this check mark, or if you don't like it, you can hit Escape or this little no symbol to cancel it. I'm going to pretend I like this a whole lot. I think it looks okay. But let's say I like the background a whole lot. I'm going to hit the check mark. And there we go. Pretty cool image. A couple other things we're going to do to this, just to show you some of the options that are available in Photoshop. We can, for example, go to our layers menu and choose any layer that we want. So let's choose our paper layer, which is layer 2. I can click on that and rename that paper if I so choose, just like that. And you have the option, for example, in Photoshop to adjust what's called the opacity of the image. That's just Photoshop's word for transparency. And so we can see if we scale the opacity down, we can get it to where we can't even hardly notice that there's paper that's there. Or we can make our opacity, close to 100%. So that if the opacity is at 0, it's completely transparent. If it's 100%, you can see the original layer completely. And so we're going to make the opacity here about 88% just to add a little bit of color to our background. Now, a couple other things to mention. As you're working with Photoshop, you might add a layer, a shape, a background, a photograph, whatever. And it feels like, for one reason or another, the work you've done has disappeared. When really, the order of the layers in your layers menu really matters. Whatever is at the top here of your layers menu is kind of in the front or the foreground of your image. Whatever is at the top of your layers window list. Whatever is at the bottom of that list is going to be what's kind of in the background. So sometimes people will add something to Photoshop and they'll think they deleted a layer, when actually that's not the case. When instead all they've done is simply added something that's changed around this order. So feel free to play around with that. So if you were to add text, and let's add text just to finish this. And so let's choose Georgia Bold 36-point font starting out. And let's choose a color for that font. One thing that I like to do is if I can find a color already within the image that I'm using, like I'm going to choose this shade of blue, I can actually, instead of picking from the color picker, I can go to my Photoshop document and you'll see kind of an eyedropper show up, and I can choose, for example, the shade of blue from this folder as my text color, and I know those are going to work together because that will help complement the photograph that's already in the image. So I'm going to hit OK, and then all I have to do is go in here and type whatever I want to type at the top of my kind of mini poster flyer. I can click here and it will put some kind of temporary text there in place, and I'm going to type visit the campus bookstore, and let's say I want to make that bigger. all you've got to do when your text layer is highlighted, just like you would in Microsoft Word, you can highlight that and you can make that whatever size you want it to be and kind of move that around as you go. You're also not limited when you're working with text in Photoshop to these certain point sizes. So right now I've got 36, 48, and 60 as the nearest options, but if I wanted this to be a 51 point font, I can go in and type that. Then I can use my move tool to move that text. I can even make sure, so my little crosshairs show up here, that I make sure that it's centered. And we can add some additional text to this image if we want. We can add some text effects by using our add a layer style option at the bottom of our layers window. We can do all sorts of things. But for now, we'll go ahead and conclude this tutorial. But I want to emphasize that if you can follow along with what I just did, you can create really exciting posters, flyers, advertisements in really a matter of minutes if you get experienced and familiar with Photoshop. So again, what we did is we used our magic wand tool, select and then select inverse to select a opposite of a background to move a model out of a photograph. We moved that layer over to our blank canvas. We then use the transform tool to resize our individual by going to edit, transform, and scale. We then added a different background layer, the paper layer, and we adjusted the opacity of that layer. And we used our old friend, the text tool, to, you guessed it, add some text to our mini poster or flyer here. Last thing to do is save this. Again, anytime you're working with Photoshop, you want to save it as a Photoshop file first. To do that, all you've got to do is make sure that you're choosing Format Photoshop and that your file name is something.psd. I want to call it foldernow.psd and hit save. Maximize compatibility is checked, so I'm going to hit OK. And now I can also export this, for example, in a variety of different formats, or I can simply save it as, on my computer, save it as a nice basic JPEG in the downloads folder in maximum quality, standard format, hit OK. And now I could even open Firefox, a simple web browser. Go to File, Open File. And I can open foldernow.jpg. And suddenly I have an image that I can share with the world that's in a simple small JPEG file that I made using Adobe Photoshop. With that being said, thanks for watching, thanks for listening, and thanks for being a part of this class. I'll be with you again soon. Take care, everyone.